So, you want to start a clothing brand. Design a shirt, put it on a website, watch the orders come in. A shirt that cost you $10 to make, you sell for $59. That's not a margin. That's a business model most people would kill for. 77% gross profit before you've spent a cent on anything else. And that number is completely real. It's also almost completely meaningless, because it's measuring the one part of this business that was never actually going to break you. Here's the shape of the real industry. Apparel brands selling direct to consumers report gross margins that typically land somewhere between 55 and 70%. Healthy. Enviable, even. But once every hidden cost underneath that number gets stripped out, net profit for most of those same brands sits in the low single digits. A meaningful share never turn a profit at all. So here's the actual question worth asking. If the markup on a t-shirt is this generous, why does the average new clothing brand not make it past its third year? Look at two brands that started the exact same way. Rhone launched in 2014 out of a spare bedroom, two guys trying to build performance menswear nobody else was making. By 2023 it had raised over $100 million and was doing north of $200 million a year in revenue. In that same window, thousands of nearly identical performance wear labels launched on Shopify with the same fabric, the same suppliers, the same ad platforms, and quietly disappeared. Same industry. Same margins on paper. Wildly different outcomes. Part of why this keeps happening is that starting a clothing brand has never been easier. Shopify, TikTok, and a factory contact on Alibaba let anyone open a store by the weekend. Hundreds of thousands of new apparel stores launch every year. Most of them never cross 100 total sales. First-time founders make the same mistake almost every time. They take the cost to make the product, subtract it from the retail price, and call the difference profit. That number is fiction. The actual business lives entirely outside of it. So where does the money really go? Start with the $9 shirt. Made in a factory in Vietnam or Guangzhou. $9, landed cost, at the factory gate. That's the number every new founder falls in love with. But the shirt doesn't teleport from the factory floor to your customer's doorstep. It has to travel, and every step quietly adds another cost. Ship it by sea and you're paying somewhere between $3 and $5 a unit, with a transit time of 3 to 6 weeks. Need it faster? Air freight runs $6 to $12 a unit, sometimes more, depending on how badly you need it and how much cargo space everyone else wants at the same time. Then it crosses a border. Import duties on apparel into the US typically run anywhere from 10 to 30% depending on the fabric blend. On a $9 shirt, that's another $1 or $2 gone before it's even touched a shelf. And once it gets there, the spending still isn't over. Somebody has to store this thing and pack it the moment an order comes in. Third-party fulfillment companies, the kind that handle orders for small brands, typically charge $2 to $4 per unit for storage and pick and pack combined. Then the sale happens, and even getting paid costs money. Payment processors take roughly 3% of the transaction plus a flat fee. On a $40 sale, that's over $1 gone automatically, every single time. Now add branded packaging, a return label tucked inside just in case, and a small reserve set aside for damaged returns, and you're looking at another $2 to $5 per unit. And then there's the return itself. Apparel sold online gets returned at a rate of 20 to 40%. Compare that to a physical store, where returns sit closer to 5 to 10%. Nearly 1 in 3 online orders comes back, and when it does, you don't get any of those costs refunded. The outbound shipping. The payment fee. The packaging. You eat every one of them. Put it all together, and that $9 shirt has quietly become an $18 to $22 shirt. Before a single dollar goes toward telling anyone it exists. And the thing that eats the rest of the price tag hasn't even shown up yet. This is where most brands actually die. Not in the factory. In the ad account. Getting a stranger on the internet to become a paying customer is called customer acquisition, and the cost of doing that has been climbing for a decade. In the mid-2010s, acquiring a customer for a clothing brand through Facebook or Instagram ads cost somewhere around $10 to $15. Today, that same customer routinely costs between $30 and $60, sometimes more. A specific event accelerated that jump. In 2021, Apple changed its operating system to let iPhone users opt out of being tracked across apps. Most of them did. Overnight, advertising platforms became much less certain about who was actually likely to buy something, which meant brands had to spend 2 to 3 times more to get the same number of sales they used to get for less. Now run the math on one transaction. A $40 shirt, real landed cost around $20. That leaves $20 of what looks like profit. But if it cost you $30 in advertising just to bring that one customer to your site, you didn't make $20. You lost 10 on the sale that was supposed to be your win. Brands try to route around this by paying influencers directly instead of running ads through an auction. A single mid-tier influencer post might run a few $1,000s flat. Sometimes it converts beautifully. Sometimes it produces almost nothing, because the audience was interested in the influencer, not in buying anything. And even without influencers, the math is brutal. Cold traffic, people seeing your brand for the very first time, typically converts into a sale only 1 to 2% of the time. Meaning 98 to 99% of every dollar spent reaching new people produces no revenue at all. Founders, excited by early traction, often pour tens of thousands of dollars into ads before they've actually proven anyone besides friends and family wants the product. They're scaling a fire before checking if there's any wood underneath it. If nearly every new customer costs you money the first time they buy from you, how does anyone in this business survive? Here's the part that sounds insane until you see the mechanism behind it. Some of the biggest companies in the world got there by deliberately losing money on the first purchase. Amazon built an empire on exactly this idea: spend more to acquire a customer than that first order is worth, because the goal was never the first order. The goal is every order after it. This is measured as lifetime value. If losing $20 gets you a customer who comes back and buys from you 4 more times, you didn't lose $20. You made closer to 60. The tool that makes this work is email and text marketing. For an established brand, that channel alone can generate 25 to 40% of total revenue, and it costs almost nothing per message compared to advertising. No auction. No bidding against competitors for attention. Just a list of people who already bought something once. The catch is that most customers never give you the chance to email them twice. Repeat purchase rates in apparel typically sit around 20 to 30%, which means 70 to 80% of the people you paid so much to acquire buy exactly once and vanish. Some brands try subscriptions to force that second purchase automatically. But subscriptions make a fashion label feel less special, less like something you chose, more like something you're stuck in. Others fall back on discounting, 10 to 30% off just to get people to come back. Except every discount trains a customer to wait for the next one instead of paying full price again. The entire survival of this business depends on turning strangers into repeat customers. Most brands never manage it. If loyalty really is the only path to profit, why do so many brands struggle to earn it? A plain shirt can be manufactured by 1,000 different factories for roughly the same price. What separates a $40 shirt from a $9 one isn't the fabric. It's the story wrapped around it. Successful apparel brands spend 15 to 25% of total revenue on content, photography, video, creative direction. A single professional shoot with models, a location, and a crew can run anywhere from $2,000 to $15,000. That's for one drop, one moment of the brand story. Look at Brandy Melville. A brand that built enormous reach almost entirely on aesthetic and a very specific sense of belonging, not on any real innovation in how the clothes were cut or made. People weren't buying a t-shirt because of the stitching. They were buying membership in something. This creates a strange paradox. The less functionally different your product is from everyone else's, the more expensive your branding has to become just to make people care. A founder who thinks they're starting a clothing company slowly discovers they've actually started a media company that happens to sell clothing. And the moment you've built something people want to belong to, something else starts happening almost immediately. Fast fashion manufacturers can take a design trending right now and have a version of it in stores in under 3 weeks. Ultra-fast platforms upload thousands of new products every single day, many of them lifted directly from small independent designers who spent months developing the original. Here's the part that surprises most new founders. There is almost no legal protection for the actual design of a piece of clothing. In the US, clothing is treated as a useful article, its main job is to cover a body, and functional objects generally can't be copyrighted. A landmark Supreme Court case in 2017, Star Athletica vs. Varsity Brands, drew the actual line. A graphic on a shirt, a printed pattern, that can be protected. The cut, the silhouette, the shape of the garment itself, that cannot. So a trending piece from a small brand gets copied and mass-produced within a matter of weeks. Prices on the copy drop instantly, because the copycat never paid for the original design work, the photo shoots, or the months of testing. The original brand is left with two options: discount to compete, or watch the moment pass it by. Even a genuinely successful design usually has an active shelf life of only 3 to 6 months before the market saturates with knockoffs. The better a product does, the faster the copies arrive. If originality can't protect a brand, something else has to. But before we get there, there's a much more mundane threat that kills more brands than any competitor ever will. Before a single sale, factories don't make one shirt at a time. Most require a minimum order, usually somewhere between 100 and 500 units per design, just to make it worth running their machines. Do the math on something small. 300 shirts at $9 each in factory cost. That's $2,700, paid up front, before a single customer has clicked buy. Now add multiple colors and sizes, because a customer expects options. 3 colors, 5 sizes, 300 units minimum for each combination, and you're suddenly looking at 4,500 units, and roughly $40,000 in locked-up capital, sitting in a warehouse, waiting to become cash. If those shirts don't sell the way you predicted, you can't just wait them out. You have to liquidate, often at 50 to 70% off, just to recover some of that money and free up cash flow. This exact scenario played out across the industry in 2022, when brands ordered heavily to keep up with demand they expected to continue from the pandemic years, and instead found themselves sitting on warehouses full of stock nobody wanted anymore. This is why cash flow, not profit on paper, is the single biggest reason clothing brands actually fail. Some founders try pre-orders to avoid the risk entirely, only taking payment once they know how much to make. But that shifts the pain onto the customer, who now waits weeks for something they already paid for, which quietly erodes trust in the brand. One miscalculated order, in either direction, can erase months of hard-earned profit in a single season. And if you do manage to survive all of this, and the brand actually starts to grow, here's the twist nobody warns you about. Going from 100 orders a month to 10,000 orders a month doesn't make the business 10 times harder. It makes it exponentially harder, because every system that worked fine at a small scale starts to buckle. At 100 orders, one founder can personally answer every customer email. At 10,000 orders, you need an entire team just to handle sizing questions, tracking, and exchanges. Returns, which were annoying but manageable before, now become a genuine logistics operation, with reverse shipping and inspection costs eating directly into margin on every item sent back. Advertising gets less efficient, too, not more. The audience most likely to buy from you gets exhausted quickly, and platforms are forced to show your ads to less interested people, which pushes acquisition costs up even as you spend more. And all of this sits on top of a supply chain that can be disrupted by something entirely outside your control. A delayed shipment. A congested port. One event nobody predicted. The uncomfortable truth is that plenty of brands are quietly profitable while small, and start losing money the moment they try to scale. Growth doesn't fix the weak points in a business. It finds every single one of them, at the same time. The moment this nearly broke the entire industry at once was 2021, when the global shipping system came close to collapsing. The cost of a standard shipping container from Asia to the US, which had sat around $1,500 to $2,000 for years, spiked past $10,000, and on some routes climbed well beyond $20,000 at the peak. Brands that leaned on air freight to skip the backlog saw their shipping costs double almost overnight. Container ships sat anchored outside major ports for weeks at a time. Collections that were supposed to launch on schedule simply didn't show up. Picture what that actually does to a small business. The bills keep arriving, rent on the warehouse, salaries, ad spend already committed. But the inventory that was supposed to generate revenue to pay for all of it is sitting on a ship somewhere in the middle of the ocean. Cash dries up while the calendar keeps moving. Some brands responded by shifting production back closer to home, which solved the shipping delay but doubled or tripled their unit costs instead. Others simply couldn't absorb the disruption and shut down. One global event, one supply chain hiccup, and a wave of otherwise reasonably run small businesses were gone. If a disruption thousands of miles away can end a company, how fragile was that company to begin with? Follow the dollar all the way through the system, and a strange pattern appears. The businesses that profit most reliably from a clothing brand's existence are almost never the clothing brand itself. The ad platforms collect their money whether or not the campaign ever converts into a sale. The payment processor collects its cut whether the brand made money on that transaction or lost it. The fulfillment company gets paid to store and ship the product regardless of whether it ever sells through. The influencer gets their flat fee whether the post drives a single sale or none at all. Even the factory, the one actually making the product, gets paid up front through the minimum order, completely insulated from whether the brand ever sells what it made. The clothing brand itself sits at the most exposed point in the entire chain. It absorbs the unsold inventory. It absorbs the returns. It absorbs the customer service costs and the shipping delays. Every other participant in this system gets paid regardless of outcome. The brand only gets paid if everything downstream of the factory actually works. In a very real sense, the brand isn't a manufacturer at all. It's a middleman standing between a factory that wants to sell fabric and an audience that has to be convinced to want it. Taking on almost all the financial risk, in exchange for whatever's left over. If the brand carries the most risk and captures the least guaranteed reward, why does anyone still start one? Ask failed founders what got them into this business, and the most common answer, by a wide margin, is passion for fashion. Ask what predicted whether they survived, and passion barely shows up at all. Long-term survival in this business correlates far more with marketing discipline and financial literacy than it does with design talent. Founders who came into this loving fabric, color, and silhouette often never learn to read the numbers that actually determine whether the company lives: conversion rate, acquisition cost, lifetime value, how fast inventory turns into cash. Worse, emotional attachment to a design can actively cause bad decisions. Refusing to discontinue a style that isn't selling because you're proud of it. Reordering something because you love it, not because the data says to. The romantic version of building a brand quietly hides a business that, underneath all the aesthetics, is an extremely analytical logistics and marketing operation. Loving clothes and understanding the business of clothes turn out to be two almost unrelated skills. If passion alone doesn't decide who survives, what does? The brands that make it past the 3-year mark tend to share one trait that has nothing to do with fabric. They behave like media companies that happen to sell clothing, not clothing companies that happen to make content. Look at Nike. The company spends billions of dollars a year on storytelling, culture, and athletes, far more than it spends distinguishing the technical construction of one shoe from another. What Nike is actually selling most of the time is a feeling of identity that the shoe happens to deliver. Brands that survive build something they actually own: an email list, a social following, a direct line to their own customers that doesn't require paying an advertising platform every single time they want to reach someone. That owned audience is the real asset. Not the inventory in the warehouse. Not even the logo. The trust of the people who already chose to pay attention. For those brands, the clothing itself isn't the business. It's the final step of a funnel that starts with attention and ends with a transaction, which finally answers the question this whole story has been circling. Clothing brands fail at the rate they do because most founders think they're starting a product business, when what they're actually building, whether they realize it or not, is a system for capturing and monetizing attention. The shirt was never really the business. The audience was. Picture the optimistic version. A brand nails its first product, keeps landed cost under $20 on a $40 item, keeps acquisition cost under $25 because organic content and word of mouth are doing real work, and gets a decent share of customers to buy a second and third time through email marketing instead of paid ads. Under those conditions, a brand doing roughly $1 million a year in revenue might net somewhere around $80,000 to $120,000 after every cost is accounted for. Genuinely good. Genuinely possible. Plenty of brands hit exactly this. Now picture the realistic version, the one that plays out for most founders. Acquisition cost creeps toward $40 because the platforms keep getting more expensive and less accurate. Returns run closer to 35% instead of 20%. A shipping delay or a bad inventory bet ties up $30,000 in stock that has to be liquidated at half price. That same $1 million brand doesn't net $100,000. It might net nothing. It might lose $20,000 to $40,000 in a single bad year, entirely because a handful of variables outside the founder's control moved in the wrong direction at the same time. The difference between the good year and the bad year isn't 10 or 20%. On a brand this size, it can be the entire difference between 6 figures of profit and a 5-figure loss, built completely on costs that never appear on the price tag of a shirt. That's the real economics of owning a clothing brand. Not the 70% margin printed on the label. The 5%, or less, that survives everything standing between the factory floor and the customer's closet.